The phone trembles in Maria Lopez's hands as she captures the most horrifying moments of her life. Through her shaky camera lens, we see a woman slumped over her steering wheel, blood pooling across the dashboard of a silver Honda Civic. The deafening crack of a single gunshot still echoes through the gas station parking lot. Screams pierce the humid August air as witnesses scatter in absolute terror. This is not a movie. This is not fiction. This is the final moments of Whitney Gray's life, caught on camera by a brave nurse who refused to look away. Have you ever had an aggressive driver tailgate you on the highway? Have you felt that cold fear when someone starts following you, honking relentlessly, cutting you off just to prove a point? Have you ever wondered what would happen if you encountered someone who was not just angry, but completely unhinged? Most of us have experienced road rage. Maybe someone flipped you off in traffic. Maybe someone screamed at you through their window. But for 29-year-old Whitney Gray, a simple lane change on a busy interstate transformed into a death sentence. What started as an ordinary Thursday evening commute became a cold-blooded murder that would shock the entire city of Brookhaven. A gentle graphic designer and devoted single mother, just trying to pick up her 6-year-old son from her sister's house, found herself face-to-face with a monster whose rage knew no bounds. But how does a routine drive home turn into an execution in a gas station parking lot? How does a polite apology become a woman's final words? And how did the killer's own cameras become the evidence that would send them to prison for life? This story will absolutely shock you. If you think you have heard every road rage story there is, you have not heard this one. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you are about to witness will change how you see every aggressive driver on the road. This is the shocking murder of Whitney Gray, and every terrifying second was caught on camera. Whitney Gray was the kind of person who made everyone around her feel seen. At 29 years old, she had built a quiet but meaningful life in Brookhaven, working as a freelance graphic designer from her small studio in the downtown district. Her portfolio was filled with vibrant logos for local businesses, wedding invitations that captured love stories, and colorful artwork that seemed to radiate the same warmth she brought to every conversation. But Whitney's greatest masterpiece was not something she created on her computer. It was the bond she shared with her 6-year-old son, Mason. Every morning, she would wake him up with silly voices and made-up songs. Every evening, they would curl up together on their worn but comfortable couch, reading bedtime stories until his eyelids grew heavy. Whitney often joked that Mason was her toughest client, because he was the only one who could make her completely redo a drawing just by saying it needed more dinosaurs. As a single mother, Whitney juggled her responsibilities with grace that impressed everyone who knew her. She worked late when Mason was at school, picked him up every afternoon at exactly 3:15, and somehow always found time to volunteer at his school events. Her sister Simone often marveled at how Whitney never complained, never seemed overwhelmed, even when deadlines piled up and bills stretched her budget thin. Thursday, August 15th, started like any other day for Whitney. She had spent the afternoon putting finishing touches on a logo design for a new bakery, tweaking colors and fonts until they felt just right. The project was due the next morning, which meant another late evening at her studio. But first, she needed to pick up Mason from Simone's house across town. The summer heat hung thick over Brookhaven's tree-lined streets as Whitney locked up her studio and walked to her silver Honda Civic. The city buzzed with its usual evening energy. Commuters hurried along sidewalks, their faces flushed from the humidity. Traffic moved in slow, steady streams as everyone tried to get home to air conditioning and dinner. Whitney loved this time of day in Brookhaven. The golden hour light filtered through the oak trees that lined every major street, creating a natural canopy over the busy roads below. She rolled down her windows, preferring the warm breeze to the broken air conditioner in her 12-year-old car. Classic rock played softly on the radio as she merged onto Interstate 65, her mind already shifting from work mode to mum mode. In just 20 minutes, she would be hugging Mason, hearing about his day, maybe stopping for ice cream on the way home. It was supposed to be another perfectly ordinary evening in their perfectly ordinary life. Whitney had no idea she was driving toward her final 20 minutes on Earth. While Whitney Gray represented everything gentle and kind about humanity, Victor Harlan embodied its ugliest impulses. At 42 years old, Victor owned a moderately successful auto parts business on the outskirts of Brookhaven, but success had not brought him peace. Instead, it had inflated an already dangerous ego, and given him a sense of entitlement that made him believe the world owed him constant deference. Victor's employees knew to tread carefully around their boss. His explosive temper was legendary in the office. He would scream at suppliers over minor delays, berate customers who questioned his prices, and fire workers for mistakes that barely registered. But his rage reached its peak behind the wheel of his black Dodge Charger. Local police knew Victor's license plate number by heart. Over the past 3 years, they had received dozens of complaints about his driving. Witnesses described him cutting off school buses, tailgating elderly drivers until they pulled over in tears, and screaming profanities at anyone who dared to merge in front of him. He had been cited for reckless driving 4 times, but the fines meant nothing to a man who considered aggression a form of entertainment. That Thursday evening, Victor was not alone in his Charger. Riding shotgun was his 26-year-old cousin, Darius Holt, an unemployed construction worker who had been crashing at Victor's apartment for the past month. Darius had developed an unsettling habit of recording Victor's road rage incidents on his phone, partly out of morbid fascination, and partly because he enjoyed the social media attention these videos generated. Where Whitney saw other drivers as fellow human beings just trying to get home safely, Victor saw them as obstacles to his dominance. Where Whitney would apologize for the smallest perceived slight, Victor would escalate minor traffic situations into full-blown confrontations. Where Whitney's first instinct was to de-escalate and show kindness, Victor's was to intimidate and punish. As the two men cruised down Interstate 65 that humid evening, Victor's hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. He had already honked aggressively at 3 different drivers, cursed at a family in a minivan, and made obscene gestures at a teenager who had the audacity to pass him legally. Darius held his phone ready, waiting for the next explosive moment he could capture. He had no idea that this particular evening would provide him with footage that would destroy both their lives forever. Traffic on Interstate 65 moved in frustrating stop-and-go waves as the evening rush hour reached its peak. Whitney found herself stuck behind a massive 18-wheeler hauling construction equipment, its diesel exhaust making her wrinkle her nose. The truck was moving well below the speed limit, forcing an entire line of vehicles to crawl along the right lane. Whitney glanced at the clock on her dashboard. She was already running 15 minutes late to pick up Mason, and she knew Simone would be getting worried. After checking her mirrors carefully, Whitney activated her turn signal and began to merge into the left lane, just like thousands of drivers do every single day without incident. But today was different. Today Victor Harlan was directly behind her in that left lane. The moment Whitney's Honda began its lane change, Victor erupted. His hand slammed against the horn, holding it down for a full 10 seconds of ear-splitting noise. Through his windshield, Whitney could see his face contorted with absolute fury, his mouth moving rapidly as he screamed words she could not hear but could easily imagine. Whitney's heart began to race. She had not cut him off. She had not done anything dangerous or rude. She had simply changed lanes to avoid the slow-moving truck, using her signal exactly as she was supposed to. Hoping to defuse the situation, Whitney lifted her hand and gave a small, apologetic wave through her rear window. It was the kind of gesture that usually calmed angry drivers, a universal sign of "I am sorry, I did not mean to upset you." Victor's response was immediate and terrifying. Instead of accepting the apology, he accelerated aggressively and swerved around Whitney's car, pulling directly in front of her before slamming on his brakes. The sudden stop sent Whitney's heart into her throat as she barely avoided rear-ending the Charger. Victor was not done. He repeated the maneuver again, cutting her off and brake-checking her so violently that Whitney had to grip her steering wheel to maintain control. Other drivers began honking their horns, but not at Whitney. They were honking at the black Charger that was clearly the aggressor in this dangerous game. Whitney's hands shook as she reached for her cell phone. She had never called 911 from her car before, but Victor's behavior was escalating beyond anything she had ever experienced. The dispatcher's calm voice was a lifeline in the chaos. 911, what is your emergency? There is a man in a black car who is following me and brake-checking me really hard, Whitney said, her voice trembling. I think he is trying to cause an accident. I am scared. Ma'am, can you see a license plate number? Whitney squinted through her windshield, trying to read the plate, while maintaining a safe distance from Victor's erratic driving. It is a black Dodge Charger. I cannot make out all the numbers, because he keeps swerving. Can you imagine the terror Whitney must have felt in that moment? One innocent lane change had turned her evening commute into a nightmare. Drop a comment below and let me know. Have you ever been followed or harassed by a road rage driver? How did you handle it? The dispatcher's voice crackled through Whitney's phone speaker as she desperately searched for somewhere safe to stop. Ma'am, are you able to drive to a public location with lots of people around? Whitney's eyes scanned the busy street ahead, and relief flooded through her when she spotted the familiar red and white sign of a Shell gas station. The parking lot was well lit by towering fluorescent poles, and she could see at least a dozen customers pumping gas, buying snacks, and moving around the property. Surely Victor would not continue his aggressive behavior in front of so many witnesses. "I am pulling into a gas station right now," Whitney told the dispatcher, her voice still shaking. "There are lots of people here. Maybe he will just drive away." Whitney guided her Honda Civic toward the station entrance, choosing a parking spot near the main building where the overhead lights were brightest. She felt a moment of genuine hope as she put the car in park. The nightmare was over. Victor would see all the people around and realize he had taken his road rage too far. He would drive away, and she could finally breathe again. But as Whitney reached to hang up her phone, her rearview mirror reflected her worst fear. The black Dodge Charger had followed her into the gas station parking lot. Victor did not park in a normal spot like a rational person. Instead, he positioned his Charger directly behind Whitney's Honda, blocking her escape route. The aggressive parking job sent a clear message: this confrontation was far from over. Inside the Charger, Darius Holt instinctively reached for his phone. He had recorded so many of Victor's road rage incidents that pulling out his camera had become second nature. But something felt different about this encounter. Victor's face was redder than usual, his breathing heavier, his movements more erratic. Whitney watched in growing terror as Victor's door swung open. When he stepped out of the Charger, she could see the full extent of his rage. His fists were clenched, his jaw set, his eyes locked onto her with an intensity that made her stomach drop. From her position near the gas pumps, Maria Lopez was just finishing her 12-hour shift at Brookhaven General Hospital. The 34-year-old nurse had been looking forward to getting home and soaking her tired feet when she noticed the commotion unfolding near the station entrance. Her medical training had taught her to stay alert for emergencies, and every instinct told her this situation was about to turn dangerous. Maria quietly pulled out her phone and began recording, positioning herself behind a concrete pillar where she could capture the confrontation while staying relatively safe. Whitney cracked her car window just enough to speak, hoping she could still resolve this peacefully. Her voice was small and apologetic as she called out, "Please, I am sorry. I did not see you. I am just trying to get home." Victor's response chilled everyone within earshot. "You think you can cut me off and just say sorry?" he bellowed, his voice echoing across the parking lot. As he spoke, his right hand moved to his waistband, and Whitney's blood turned to ice when she saw the unmistakable outline of a handgun. The gas station had become a trap, and Whitney was caught in the center of it. The parking lot fell into an unnatural hush as Victor approached Whitney's car, his hand resting on the grip of his concealed weapon. Other customers began to notice the confrontation, some moving away from their vehicles, others freezing in place as they sensed the danger building. Darius held his phone steady, recording every second of what he assumed would be another typical Victor Harlan intimidation show. He had filmed dozens of these encounters, always ending with the other driver backing down and Victor feeling victorious. But tonight, something felt different. Victor's movements were more aggressive, his voice louder, his entire demeanor suggesting he was past the point of rational thought. From her vantage point behind the concrete pillar, Maria Lopez kept her phone camera focused on the unfolding scene. Her medical background had taught her to remain calm under pressure, but her hands trembled slightly as she realized she might be documenting something far worse than a simple argument. "Get out of the car," Victor shouted, now standing just feet from Whitney's driver's side window. "You want to play games with me? Get out and face me like an adult." Whitney's voice was barely audible as she tried to reason with him through the partially open window. "Please, I have a little boy waiting for me. I told you I was sorry. I did not mean to make you angry." The mention of her son seemed to infuriate Victor even more. "I do not care about your kid. You think having a kid gives you the right to drive however you want?" Other gas station customers were now openly staring at the confrontation. An elderly man near the convenience store entrance called out, "Hey, leave that lady alone." But Victor was beyond hearing reason from anyone. Darius continued filming, completely unaware that his footage would become crucial evidence in a murder trial. His camera captured Victor's increasingly erratic behavior, the fear in Whitney's voice, and most importantly, the moment Victor pulled the handgun from his waistband. The sight of the weapon sent shockwaves through the parking lot. Several people began screaming and running toward the street. Maria Lopez, despite her terror, kept her phone steady and continued recording. Her nursing instincts told her that whatever happened next, someone would need evidence of how it occurred. "Please do not hurt me," Whitney pleaded, her voice breaking with fear. "Please, I just want to go home to my son." Victor raised the gun, pointing it directly at Whitney through the car window. For a moment that felt like an eternity. Time seemed frozen. The parking lot held its collective breath. Then came the sound that would haunt Brookhaven forever. The single gunshot cracked through the humid evening air like thunder. Whitney's body slumped forward against her steering wheel, her life ending in an instant of senseless violence. The aftermath was immediate chaos. Witnesses screamed in horror and terror. Some ran for cover behind vehicles while others fled toward the street, sobbing and shouting for someone to call the police. The elderly man who had tried to intervene earlier was now on his knees, vomiting from shock. Maria Lopez, despite her medical training and years of emergency situations, found herself frozen for several seconds. When she finally moved, she ran toward Whitney's car, but it was already too late. The young mother was gone. Victor and Darius wasted no time. They abandoned the Charger and fled on foot into the maze of Brookhaven's side streets, leaving behind a scene of absolute devastation and 2 phones that had captured their crime in horrifying detail. The footage that caught this killer is absolutely chilling. Maria's brave decision to keep recording, combined with Darius's own incriminating evidence, would prove crucial in bringing Whitney's murderer to justice. Like this video if you believe justice needs to be swift and sure for monsters like Victor Harlan. Detective Samuel Price arrived at the Shell gas station within minutes of the 911 call, but he was already too late to save Whitney Gray. The 22-year veteran of the Brookhaven Police Department had worked hundreds of violent crimes, but the senseless brutality of this murder struck him immediately as something that would demand his absolute best effort. Maria Lopez was still shaking when she handed over her phone to Detective Price. "I got it all on video," she whispered, tears streaming down her face, every horrible second of it. Price watched the footage once, then immediately called for additional units and forensic specialists. The video was damning evidence, but it was also something else, a window into the cold-blooded execution of an innocent woman that would outrage an entire community. Within hours, Maria's video began circulating on social media. Local news stations picked up the story by midnight, and by Friday morning, the murder of Whitney Gray was trending across multiple platforms. The hashtag Justice for Whitney spread like wildfire as thousands of people shared the horrific footage and demanded immediate arrests. The investigation moved at lightning speed. The abandoned black Dodge Charger provided a treasure trove of evidence: fingerprints, DNA samples, registration documents, and surveillance footage from traffic cameras that had captured the vehicle's movements throughout the evening. Detective Price's team identified Victor Harlan as the registered owner within 12 hours of the shooting. But it was Darius Holt's own phone that provided the most devastating evidence against both men. The device, recovered from the Charger, contained not only the complete murder sequence but also dozens of previous road rage incidents that established a clear pattern of escalating violence. Meanwhile, Whitney's sister Simone was struggling to process a reality that seemed impossible. In one evening, she had gone from being an aunt who helped with babysitting to being the sole guardian of her traumatized 6-year-old nephew. Mason kept asking when his mother was coming home, and Simone had no idea how to explain that she never would. "Whitney was the gentlest person I have ever known," Simone told reporters through her tears. She would apologize for accidentally stepping on a bug. How could someone murder her over a lane change? The public outcry intensified with each passing hour. Community leaders organized vigils, local businesses displayed Whitney's photo in their windows, and the Brookhaven Police Department received over 300 tips in the first 48 hours after the murder. The breakthrough came on Saturday morning, when a motel clerk recognized Victor and Darius from their photos on the news. The Sunset Inn on the outskirts of town had become their hideout, but their time was running out. Detective Price coordinated with SWAT teams for what would become one of the most watched arrests in Brookhaven history. Local news helicopters circled overhead as tactical units surrounded the motel. Victor and Darius surrendered without resistance, both men looking exhausted and defeated as they were led away in handcuffs. The live television coverage showed Victor's face clearly for the first time since the murder. Gone was the rage that had consumed him at the gas station. Now he just looked like what he truly was, a coward who had destroyed multiple lives over absolutely nothing. The trial of Victor Harlan began 6 months after Whitney Gray's murder, and the Brookhaven County Courthouse had never seen such intense public interest. Every seat in the gallery was filled with community members, many wearing buttons with Whitney's photo and the words "Justice for Whitney" printed below her smiling face. Victor's defense strategy was as shocking as it was absurd. His attorney argued that Victor had acted in self-defense, claiming that Whitney's lane change had been aggressive and threatening, and that Victor feared for his life when he approached her vehicle at the gas station. The courtroom erupted in disbelief when Victor took the stand and maintained his innocence. "She cut me off deliberately," he testified, his voice showing no remorse. "She was driving erratically. I thought she might have a weapon." Prosecutor Jennifer Martinez destroyed Victor's lies with surgical precision. She played Maria Lopez's footage for the jury, showing Victor's unprovoked aggression and Whitney's desperate attempts to apologize and de-escalate the situation. The video made it crystal clear that Whitney had never threatened Victor in any way. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Martinez said during her closing arguments, "you have seen with your own eyes what really happened that night. Victor Harlan executed Whitney Gray because his ego could not handle a simple lane change. This was not self-defense, this was cold-blooded murder." Darius Holt had cooperated with prosecutors from the beginning, providing testimony about Victor's history of road rage incidents in exchange for a reduced sentence of 10 years for accessory to murder. His own video footage became crucial evidence, showing the premeditated nature of Victor's actions and his complete lack of remorse. The community's demand for maximum punishment was overwhelming. More than 5,000 people signed a petition calling for life without parole, and the courthouse steps were packed with supporters holding signs reading "Whitney deserved better" and "No mercy for murderers." After just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. Judge Patricia Williams showed no hesitation when delivering the sentence. "Mr. Harlan, your actions that night were not those of someone defending himself. They were the actions of a man consumed by rage who chose to end an innocent woman's life over a perceived slight that existed only in your mind. I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole." The courtroom erupted in applause as Victor was led away in shackles, but the celebration felt hollow. Justice had been served, but it could not bring Whitney back to her son. It could not erase Mason's nightmares or fill the empty chair at their dinner table. Simone Gray hugged Prosecutor Martinez outside the courthouse, tears streaming down both women's faces. "Whitney would be proud," Simone whispered, "but I would trade this verdict in a heartbeat to have my sister back." The gavel had fallen, but the real work of healing was just beginning. In the months following Victor Harlan's conviction, Brookhaven began the slow process of healing from the trauma that had shaken the entire community. Memorial flowers appeared at the Shell gas station where Whitney died, growing into a permanent shrine that reminded drivers to choose compassion over anger. The city council voted unanimously to rename the small park near Whitney's former apartment as Whitney Gray Memorial Park. The dedication ceremony drew hundreds of residents who had never met Whitney but felt connected to her story. Mason, now 7 years old and living permanently with his aunt Simone, helped plant the first tree in the memorial garden. Simone channeled her grief into something beautiful and lasting. Using funds raised through community donations and a wrongful death settlement, she established the Whitney Gray Creative Arts Scholarship. The program provides financial assistance to young single mothers pursuing careers in graphic design, photography, and digital arts. Whitney believed creativity could change the world, Simone explained at the scholarship launch. This ensures her belief lives on. Maria Lopez never expected to become a public figure, but her courage in recording Whitney's murder made her a powerful voice for road rage awareness. She began speaking at driver education classes, community forums, and even legislative hearings about the deadly consequences of aggressive driving. "I wish I could have saved Whitney," Maria often told audiences, "but maybe her story can save someone else." Detective Samuel Price used Whitney's case to advocate for enhanced penalties for road rage incidents. He worked with state legislators to draft new laws that would classify road rage, resulting in injury or death, as a separate, more serious category of crime, with mandatory minimum sentences. The ripple effects extended far beyond Brookhaven. Whitney's story became a cautionary tale featured in driver education programs across 3 states. Local police departments began hosting community seminars on conflict de-escalation, teaching drivers practical strategies for dealing with aggressive motorists. Perhaps most importantly, Whitney's death sparked conversations in homes, schools, and workplaces about the human cost of unchecked anger. Parents used her story to teach children about emotional regulation, Therapists referenced her case when helping clients understand the importance of anger management. The changes were not just symbolic. Traffic citations for aggressive driving increased by 30% in Brookhaven as police focused more resources on road rage prevention. Emergency dispatchers received new training on how to handle calls from drivers being followed or threatened. Whitney Gray had lived 29 years as a kind, creative soul who touched lives through her art and her love for her son. In death, she became something more, a catalyst for change that made roads safer and communities more compassionate. Every single day, you get behind the wheel of your car and join millions of other drivers on roads across the country. Most of us are just trying to get to work, pick up our kids, or run errands. But statistics show that road rage incidents have increased by 47% over the past 5 years, with over 1,200 people killed annually in aggressive driving situations. Whitney Gray thought she was making a safe routine lane change. She had no way of knowing that Victor Harlan was having the worst day of his life and looking for someone to blame. Her story reminds us that we share the road with people fighting battles we know nothing about. If you ever find yourself in Whitney's situation, here is what experts recommend. Never engage with an aggressive driver. Do not make eye contact, do not gesture, and definitely do not get out of your vehicle. If someone is following you aggressively, drive to the nearest police station, fire department, or busy public location. Stay in your car with the doors locked and call 911 immediately. Remember that your ego is not worth your life. It does not matter if you were right or if the other driver was wrong. What matters is that you get home safely to the people who love you. But this story is not just about protecting yourself from people like Victor Harlan. It is also about making sure you never become like him. The next time someone cuts you off, takes your parking space, or drives slower than you would prefer, remember Whitney Gray. Remember that the person in that other car might be a single parent trying to pick up their child, a nurse heading home from a double shift, or someone fighting their own battles. Choose patience over anger. Choose compassion over rage. Choose to be the driver who makes the road safer for everyone. Whitney's death was not in vain if it saves even one life. Subscribe to this channel, share this story with everyone you know, and let us make our roads safer together. What would you have done in Whitney's situation? Let me know in the comments below.